Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are getting a clearer picture of the role that the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Ginni Thomas, played in the right-wing ecosystem. She's functioned as a key link between the furthest fringes of the conspiracy theory-believing right and the absolute centers of power, including not just the Supreme Court, but also the White House. New reporting from the Daily Beast reveals that Ginni Thomas, a longtime conservative activist, would regularly go to the White House. That's during the Trump years, and make, quote, insane hiring and firing recommendations to then President Donald Trump. She would show up for White House meetings, quote, armed with written memos of who she and her allies believed Trump should hire for plum jobs and who she thought Trump should promptly purge. According to a former senior Trump administration official, quote, we all knew that within minutes after Ginni left her meeting with the president, he would start yelling about firing people for being disloyal. When Ginni Thomas showed up, you knew your day was wrecked. Another former official describes Thomas's memos as, and I quote here, dripping with paranoia and read like they were written by a disturbed person. Okay, step back for a second. Ginni Thomas would regularly just show up at the White House. She would meet with the president of the United States, and she would tell him who she thought he should fire and hire, which of course prompts the question, how did someone like this end up with that much power in the first place? It is hard to get White House meetings. It's hard to get FaceTime with the president. Ginni Thomas is the kind of person who is able to get that. And she has, I have to say, a fascinating backstory. In some ways, I think a microcosm of a certain generation of conservatives. So she comes from a deeply conservative family in Omaha, Nebraska. In fact, somewhat coincidentally, writer Kurt Anderson recalls growing up across the street from her. Quote, my parents, Goldwater Republicans, always disparaged her parents as John Birchers, referring to the far-right John Birch Society. And Ginni Thomas began her career in conservative politics in the early 1980s, was working for a Republican congressman when she became involved in, well, a cult known as Lifespring. In 1987, the Washington Post reported extensively about Lifespring, which trained members in a series of expensive courses and cited experts, quote, who believe Lifespring is a dangerous company that uses psychological tricks to manipulate minds. Ginni Thomas spoke to the Post for that article, telling them that she was confused and troubled by exercises, such as one in which trainees listened to The Stripper while disrobing to skimpy bikinis and bathing suits. The group then stood in a U-shaped line, made fun of fat people's bodies, and riddled one another with sexual questions. Thomas said it took her months to break fully from Lifespring's, quote, high-pressure tactics. I'd intellectually and emotionally gotten myself so wrapped up with this group, I was moving away from my family and friends, the people I work with. My best friend came to visit me, and I was preaching at her, using that tough attitude they teach you. She went on to describe hiding out in another part of the country to avoid constant phone calls from fellow trainees who were taught that it was their responsibility to make Thomas keep her commitment to Lifespring. Now, in 1986, after she escaped the cult and was deprogrammed, Ginni Thomas spoke at an event for former cult members. And it's really gripping testimony. She described the very real psychological challenge of not being overly drawn into fighting the cult as a kind of replacement for the cult itself.
Hi, I was in Lifespring, and I was what I considered to be deprogrammed. And I guess coming out of, when we talk about it, the focus of this discussion is on coming out of a cult. There were a number of things that went on for me. When you come away from a cult, you have to find a balance in your life as far as getting involved with fighting the cult or exposing it. And kind of the other angle is getting a sense of yourself and what was it that made you get into that group, and what open questions are there that still need to be answered. And I think I'm struggling with a balance between that. I want to expose Lifespring. I want to keep other people from going through that experience. But I also don't want to go overboard in that regard. So all those things that got me to Lifespring are still there. And I guess I struggle with not going overboard and fighting the cults, but I know that's important too.
Now, the year after that video was filmed, again, very self-aware, very compelling, raw, emotional testimony there. The year after that was filmed, Ginni married her current husband, Clarence Thomas. He was then the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now, Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court in 1991 to replace, of course, Justice Thurgood Marshall. He's now the longest serving member of the court, and one could argue the most influential member of the court. Ginni Thomas continued to work in conservative politics for the Heritage Foundation during the George W. Bush administration, later founding a lobbying group. In 2020, Ginni Thomas made headlines of her own when Anita Hill revealed that Thomas had left her a voicemail asking for an apology. Now, for context, Hill accused Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment during his confirmation hearings, somewhat famously, back in 1991. So Ginni Thomas called Anita Hill asking for an apology nearly 20 years after the fact. And now you've likely seen Ginni Thomas's name in the news again. Again, not because she's the wife of Clarence Thomas, no, because the Washington Post obtained copies of messages that had been turned over to the January 6th committee, revealing that Ginni Thomas sent former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows a barrage of texts in the weeks after the 2020 election, urging him to try to overturn the results. She was pro-coup. She referred to wild far-right conspiracy theories, sending Meadows a link to an absolutely just insane YouTube video that's since been taken down, which was centered around a fake QAnon conspiracy theory referencing a Trump sting. The video was by a far-right commentator who also claimed that Sandy Hook massacre was a false flag. After she texted that video to Meadows, Thomas added, quote, "I hope this is true." She also sent Meadows a passage that had circulated on right-wing websites claiming, quote, "Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud right now and over coming days and will be living in barges off Gitmo to face military tribunals for sedition." Ginni Thomas has also come under scrutiny for endorsing the rally that preceded the insurrection on January 6th, writing on Facebook that morning, quote, "Watch MAGA crowd today, love MAGA people." Thomas admits that she attended that rally herself, although she says she left before Donald Trump began speaking. Because of all this, because the wife of sitting Supreme Court justice was knee-deep in the big lie the election was stolen, actively texting Trump's chief of staff, urging him to be more vociferously pro-coup, and because Clarence Thomas, in his role as Supreme Court justice, already participated in two cases relating directly to the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection, including being the lone dissenter, arguing the Trump White House records should not be sent to the January 6th committee, records which could have included his own wife's texts. Because of all that, because of the manifest and obvious conflict of interest, there are calls for Clarence Thomas to resign. There's a letter from members of Congress demanding at the least he recuse himself from any upcoming 2020 election cases. And so now the January 6th committee is reportedly preparing to request an interview with Ginni Thomas. There's a way you could say that Ginni Thomas is now the member of, well, another cult, or at least a totalizing belief system, if you want to be charitable, which is that of Donald Trump. But even before Trump, Ginni Thomas's politics were very clear. She has been a member of the conservative movement for many years. And there have long been people who scrutinize the Thomases for that, as well as those who ask the question of what her work has to do with her husband. Ginni and Clarence Thomas have often called themselves a team. Listen to how Justice Thomas put it in 2018 in an interview for his wife's online series.
And the best part of being a justice?
It's, first of all, it'd be impossible without you. I have to be honest. I mean, it would be, it's sort of like, how do you run with one leg? You can't. I mean, it makes it whole when I have my wife.
It's a very sweet and genuine sentiment about a married couple. It's impossible to ignore the fact that Ginni Thomas has power in Washington in some non-measurable degree to which, because of who her husband is. He's one of the most important conservatives in all of Washington. And this is not my speculation. As Jonathan V. Last put it recently in The Bulwark, quote, "The only reason she was texting the president's chief of staff instead of being the angry cat lady on Facebook is because she married a man who got himself appointed to the Supreme Court." But again, this is not an outlier, Ginni Thomas. Her views are not outlier views. It's embedded in the nature of the modern conservative movement. And even if Trump isn't president, that's the point, because MAGAism, that belief system, that totalizing belief system, is still just a step away from power.